Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. I have nothing interesting to say to you. Let's just jump in, okay? So, yesterday we started talking about Greece, right? And I said Greece was kind of it's a different type of civilization, right? As we'll see, it comes from a different context. Um, with the exception of BC First Nations, all of the sort of major civilizations we've studied have come from a similar context, right? They've come from large river valleys and intensive agriculture and all that stuff. But Greece is a different kind of animal. They're a different civilization, but so they're worth kind of looking at just because they're different, but also because when we look at what sort of Western European culture has become, Greece is so important, right? They're the kind of high classical period of Greek culture lasts a very short time. It's like 100 or 150 years, but that 150 years is heavily influential in other cultures, and so the Romans will heavily borrow or steal or plagiarize, whatever you want to say. They will heavily steal from the Greeks. And then, of course, Europeans will borrow from the Greeks a little bit later on, starting in the Renaissance, and then a little bit later during the French Revolution, and then the Enlightenment, and all the way to today. And so you can't really understate how important Greek culture is to the sort of Western European culture. And to be honest, if the Greeks never existed, I have no idea what Western Europe or North America would look like. It would be a very different place because a lot of the things that we do and think and believe and the ways that we think about things all come to us from ancient Greece. And without ancient Greece, I don't know what kind of culture we have here. They've been so influential. So, without further ado, we said yesterday that the Greek world of the past is a little different than the Greek world of the present, right? So, present day Greece is kind of this area here and a bunch of these islands, especially if you want to go out and hang out and drink, head to one of these islands. But here and probably right about to here, that's kind of Greece today, right? The country of Greece. But ancient Greece is a little different because about 3,000 years ago, the Greeks start moving out into the Mediterranean and setting up colony cities all around the Aegean Sea. And so the Greek world of the past is kind of this area around the Aegean rather than just Greece itself, okay? So there's lots and lots of Greeks up there in what's called Thrace at the time. Here in the Persian Empire, you can see it's called Lydia sometimes, and Caria. Sometimes it's called Asia Minor as well. That area is all kind of heavily Greek at the time. And as a result, the Greeks are, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but the Greeks are very kind of sea-oriented, okay? So they have lots of ships, they do lots of trading and sailing around the Aegean. And so a lot of the other civilizations we've seen are focused on farming around the river valley. They're very land-based. The Greeks are very sea-based, and so they're always setting off, sailing around, trading, sometimes going to war. But the sea and sort of seagoing vessels are very important to their history. So I asked you to read this yesterday, and we didn't probably get through it. Can I give you just 5 minutes to review it, and then we'll talk about the answers to these questions? Yes? Okay. Putting 5 minutes on the clock. 5 minutes on the clock, and then we will discuss the polis, Greek geography, subsistence practices, and raw materials. Très intéressant, oui? don't know. I don't know why I'm in a French mood today. I don't really speak French, but there we go. Ugh. You're okay, Felicia. Okay, you ready, good people? Hello. 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 Is anyone out there? I know you're out there. I can hear you reloading. Come on. Let's start with the first one. What is a polis? An independent city-state? Consisting of a walled city and what else? And protecting the farmland around it. Right, so the Greek city-state is not, the polis is not strange in that way, right? We heard in ancient Mesopotamia, we also had very similar city-states, right? So there was a city, there was an urban center, it had some sort of a ruler, right, or a king, and they kind of had control of the farmland around them, right? So in that way, the Greek polis is not that strange, but it is very interesting in a number of other ways, okay? Now, the first thing to note is that all of these little Greek polis, as they're called in plural, all of these little polis are different. They're unique. And actually, we still use this word. If you've ever heard of metropolis, there's at Metrotown, right? There's metropolis, metropolis, right? And it comes from the Greek word. It comes from the Greek city-state. So we still kind of reference the original Greek polis. Anyway, they're all unique. They're all kind of their own world. Okay, so if you were in ancient Mesopotamia and you were living in Uruk, and then you moved to Eridu, it probably wouldn't be that different, right? It'd be a different city, but it'd be a very familiar feel. There'd be a king of Eridu. There'd be a ziggurat in the middle of the city, and it would kind of be different but the same, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like if you moved from Vancouver to Abbotsford, well, not Abbotsford right now, it's underwater. If you moved from, sorry Abbotsford, this is horrible. If you moved from Vancouver to Burnaby, kind of the same thing, right? Little different, mostly the same. But Greek polises are very interesting in that they're all unique. They're all kind of their own world. They all have their own kind of culture. They have their own kind of way of being. They all have their own style of government. And the style of government is different depending on what Greek city-state you go to. So they're all kind of unique little cities. And again, you know, living in Corinth is not the same thing as living in Argos. And living in Argos is not the same thing as living in Sparta. And living in Sparta is not the same thing as living in Athens. Those are all totally different places to live and kind of ways of living. So whereas, you know, the Mesopotamian city-states, yeah, one is kind of mostly like the other. The Greek city-states are unique places to live, even though they do have this kind of common Greek culture, but the way they go about living is unique and interesting. But we'll get to that a bit later. Secondly, what's Greece's geography like? What is the geography of Greece like? Yeah. It's a very mountainous place.
Yeah, and at the first level, the mountain nature.
Yeah.
That in the north of, like the focus on the north of the Greece.
Yeah.
And that like all different region to remain somewhat isolated.
Right. So Greece is a very mountainous place. Like I mentioned, very different from the river valley civilizations that we have come across before. It's very rocky, very mountainous, and so it isolated these city-states and allowed them to develop on their own, right? When the land is flat, it's very easy to kind of line up your army and march it all the way across and take over whatever you want, right? That's much more easy. But when The landscape is really rocky and mountainous. It's really hard to move your army around, right? It's really hard to get into big battles because there's no flat areas, right? And so Greece doesn't really ever, not ever, but in this period it's not really united, right? Egypt was united under the pharaoh, right? And later on in Mesopotamia, there were empires that united all of those city-states, right? The Indus River Valley civilization was united, right? Ashoka and Chandragupta Maurya's empire was united. But the Greeks never really kind of united that way because it was just really difficult for one city-state to conquer all the others because it was just such a pain in the neck to move around, right? Because everything was so rocky and mountainous. What were people doing for food? How were they getting food in this ancient Greece? Food, subsistence. Right. Olive trees are very important to ancient Greece, particularly for Athens, but for other areas as well. Yeah. They had metals. Did you say? Okay. So yep, there is corn, wheat, and berries. Oh, barley. Barley. Okay. Yeah. So there is some agriculture going on in Greece, right? There is some farmland available. Not quite as much as in the river valley civilizations, but some people are farming. Some people are growing olive trees. And again, olives get used a lot. You can eat them. You can press them into oil, right? Very, very useful. You can put it on your skin to keep it moist and put it into your hair to make it shiny. And olive oil's got all kinds of different uses for the ancient Greeks. What else?
Can I add something?
Yes, you can.
And I think invent the cotton from agriculture. Not invent, but they made cotton from agriculture.
What did they make?
It is cotton. C-O-T-T.
Oh, cotton.
Cotton.
Cotton, yes. Yeah, so they're
They made cotton from agriculture.
sure they're growing things to make clothes from. Sure, good. Not really subsistence, but that's okay. Maybe the only other thing we should say about subsistence is big emphasis on the sea as well, right? So Greece is surrounded by the Mediterranean and the Aegean and the Adriatic, and so lots of fishing, right? Lots of people going out in their boats, catching fish, important source of food and protein for the Greeks, right? So lots of fish, lots of olives, lots of other fruits as well, some grains. They have some domestic, they do some pastoralism as well, right? They have herds of sheep and goats and things like that. So kind of a bit of a mixture, right? A mixture of different subsistence practices, right? Some farming, some growing of olives, some fishing, some animal herding, a little bit of everything, right? Okay, so raw materials, we said that they had cotton, they have the olive trees for oil, right? That's more food, but what? Tobacco. Okay, tobacco. Yeah. Felicia, you said they had some metals, right? Yeah. Good. So we have some metals available to them. What else?
They use
Wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wood is also useful.
Some kind of food.
Could be acacia. We kind of mentioned that in the subsistence practices, but they grew wheat and barley, yes. Other raw materials? Access to wood and metal. And what? Plaster? Yeah, definitely, right? So plaster is kind of created from minerals, limestone and etc. that you get from the earth, and you mix it together and you can spread it on the walls, right? Um, one more thing.
So this is it.
Okay. Did you say the clay soil? Nice, yeah. Cl- Clay is also very important because the Greeks make a lot of pottery, okay? Just an absolute ton of pottery. And pottery is very useful to us as historians and archaeologists because pottery preserves really, really well, okay? So some things rot away, right? Like papyrus just turns to dust eventually, paper turns to dust, things that are made out of animal skins rot away eventually. But clay, if you fire it properly, if you bake it in a kiln, it is indestructible, right? You cannot, it'll break, but if it goes in the ground, it'll stay there for thousands of years and you can dig it up and it's almost exactly as it was thousands of years ago. Really tough stuff. But let me show you some pictures here. So yeah, really mountainous in Greece. And again, it's useful for, it's useful for kind of defending against external attacks. It's hard for enemies to attack Greece, but it's also difficult for Greece to unite, right? One city-state can't conquer the others because it's just too mountainous and it's hard to move your army, right? So here, I'll show you just some postcard style pictures of ancient Greece, but you can see it's a pretty rocky, mountainous area, right? Yeah.
And what is the last one that you
The-
fixed? The raw material?
Clay. So the things you make pots out of,
Oh,
pottery clay, if you will. Yeah. So a couple of ancient Greek ruins here, but you can see really, really rocky, right? Really rocky, really mountainous. Hard to move around. Here's Athens and the Acropolis, but we'll get to Athens and the Acropolis a little bit later. Quite beautiful, I think, right? Lots of blues and greens, especially the Greek islands. If you want to go hang out in the sun and, drink a fruity drink, the Greek islands are a great place to do that. Yeah, look at that, hey? Gorgeous, gorgeous. But still, this is the kind of thing where, like, how are you gonna, if you're gonna bring your army to Greece to invade? I mean, look at this. You gotta like land on a beach and then like climb a mountain to get into Greece. Holy cow! What?
It's like Viking.
Yeah, but it's even so. That's a tough. You can't just land your boat and go, right? You're landing the boat and then there's a mountain in front of you, right? It's really difficult to get into Greece and to attack it. So Greece is kind of naturally defended by its mountains.
Do you know how they attack to Greece?
How they what?
Yeah, I see a movie that it was about the past. It was like a historical movie. Then some groups want to attack to Greece. They make something that they take the ships, they with like wood and they take the ships from the sea up to like the mountains. I can like
I don't know if that's Greece. You might be thinking about.
also I see in like one historical book that it was two.
Okay.
They want to attack Greece and they attack like this go behind the mountains and take the ships up to the mountains and then they attack them. It's like overseas.
I don't know if I know that story. I know the Greeks were attacked by the Persians a couple of times, and then later by Alexander from Macedon. I don't remember a story of ships being taken up to the mountains, but I. What's that? It's under what? I think so. Alexander attacked Greece? Yeah. Yeah, Alexander is from, well, let me just back up here. Nope, he's from Macedon. So the yellow part there. So his father is Philip II, and Philip II gains control of Macedonia. He starts to move south and take over parts of Greece. Philip dies, Alexander becomes king, and then Alexander goes on a tear and conquers Greece and Persia and Egypt and all the way to India. Alexander? Yes. Yeah. He's a Macedonian who were probably not too different from the Greeks, but the Greeks thought they were a bunch of barbarians up there, funnily enough. And in fact, the word barbarian actually comes from Greek, because the Greeks thought that anyone who wasn't speaking Greek, to them it sounded like bar 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 bar. And so they kind of joked they were barbarians. Anyway, it's a Greek joke that now is a real word.
So it's about the Alexander.
Oh, it's Alexander?
Yeah, the Alexander attacking to the Greece.
Okay.
I will show you the picture on the.
Okay. Okay, so, all right, definitely the Alexander attack. But we probably won't get to that because we have limited time. But anyway, okay, so Greece is a very mountainous place. It's difficult to invade. It's also difficult to kind of take over from the inside. We said for agriculture, people were growing a variety of different things, some wheat, some barley, some fruits and vegetables. Olive trees are a big deal here in Greece. They grow really well, and they're useful for all kinds of things, right? You can just eat the olives because they're tasty, although, I don't know, I don't really like olives that much, kind of so-so on them. Olive oil is very useful, right, for cooking and all kinds of things. And so the Greeks kind of grow and fish and farm and kind of have a variety of different things that they use to subsist on. In terms of resources, we said they do have some metals and some wood, but they have lots and lots of clay. And so the Greeks get very, very good at making pottery, some of which they sell their olive oil in, if you will. There's a few different styles that you'll see. Some of it is called black figure, and some of it is called red figure. The black figure looks like this. And making this kind of thing is really tricky. Okay, so you have to make the pot, of course, which is one thing, and it's a nicely made pot. But the painting on it is very difficult to do. So you have to paint the pot with different colors, right? And the colors have different sort of oxides and minerals in them. And then to get the colors to sort of show up, you have to put them in the oven, right? You put them in the kiln. You get the temperature really high, and it has to do with whether you allow oxygen into the oven or whether you shut the oxygen off. And when you shut the oxygen off, it allows some colors to develop and to appear. And then when you let the oxygen back in, other colors will show up, and then you change the temperature. And you have to do all this with no clocks, because clocks don't really exist yet, and no thermometers, because thermometers don't exist yet either. So you kind of have to know how hot the kiln is, and you have to know your timing, and you just have to kind of feel it out, because there's no clocks or thermometers to do this. So it's really quite a talent and a skill, not only to make the pot, not only to have, you know, the artistic skill to paint them, but to paint them with the correct pigments and then fire them in the right way so that the colors actually come out. So it's not an easy thing to do. And interestingly, even though a pot like this would be in a museum today and is in a museum today, to the ancient Greeks it wasn't a big deal. It was just like a pot that you would buy olive oil in. And if you paid, you know, $10 for that jug of olive oil in ancient Greece, probably like $9 would be for the oil and $1 would be for the pot. So the ancient Greeks didn't really think this was a big deal. It's like, yeah, it's a pot. That's what the olive oil comes in. But of course, nowadays we're putting these things in museums, right? Imagine if somebody put this in a museum like thousands of years from now. They're like, wow, look at it. And of course, today we're like, what? It's a thing, right? It doesn't matter. So yeah, the ancient Greeks didn't really think these were a big deal. Now, of course, we think they're works of art, and they are. But yeah, lots and lots of pottery like this. Not all of it is quite so elaborately decorated. Some of it is. Some of the people who made the pots were trying to one up other sort of other ceramics makers. So they would paint a scene like this, and then they'd write at the bottom, oh, I bet Tafadzwa couldn't paint one this well. So they'd do their best work, and then they'd try to rub it in the face of other pot makers, kind of thing. So it's kind of weird. Does anyone recognize what's happening on this pot here? It's not a knight, but it's a warrior. Knights don't exist yet. What's that? Close, right? So this warrior is killing this woman, right? Interestingly, she's a warrior too. Has anyone ever heard of the Iliad? Iliad? No? So the Iliad is, so you remember we talked about the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? This epic story from Mesopotamia. The Iliad and the Odyssey are epic stories from ancient Greece. And in the Iliad, there is a scene where this great warrior, Achilles, if you've seen Troy with Brad Pitt, maybe you know this one, but this is Achilles killing an Amazon warrior named Penthesilea. And they send Penthesilea to fight Achilles. Achilles defeats her, and just as he's about to, he takes his spear back, knocks her helmet off, and stabs her with the spear. And as soon as he stabs her, he looks in her eyes and falls in love with her at the same time as he's killing her. Ugh. Tragic. Because it's tragic. And the Greeks love this stuff. The Greeks love that kind of tragedy, right? They like their stories to have some like horrible. Well, let me see what's happening. Oh yeah, so she's got her own spear, but no, she doesn't stab him. You can kind of see it actually. It's in front of him. So she kind of misses, but he succeeds in killing her, but of course falls in love at the same moment that he kills her. Oh. Right? Oh, goosebumps, exactly. The Greeks love that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's just one little scene from the Iliad. Achilles is a Greek hero, a demigod, if you will, just like Gilgamesh is. But yeah, there's lots of Greek pottery like this. Lots of them have scenes from myth. Of course, this is just one of them. Right, Zerlinda? Yeah, they have scenes from myth, just like this. There's other ones that are red figure as well. So you can see this one's a little bit different. Fewer colors, right? There's only kind of black and red. Whoops. Here we've got black and red and white as well, right? And even another kind of red, right? Like a deeper red. So this one's a little more simple, right? A little easier to do, but another mythological scene. Do you know this myth at all? Anybody? No? This is Actaeon. And Actaeon is a hunter. He goes off into the woods one day with his hunting dogs to hunt for deer, and he accidentally catches Artemis, the goddess of the moon and of the hunt. He accidentally sees her having a bath in a waterfall, sees her naked. Whoops. Artemis is angry and upset and embarrassed. She turns him into a deer. And then she hunts him. And his hunting dogs hunt him as well. And then they wind up, tearing him apart at the end. So again, pretty intense. At least I think that's what's happening, right? Yeah. So another Greek myth kind of showing up on pottery. And again, the Greeks had lots and lots of pottery because they had lots and lots of clay, right? This might be a scene from the Iliad or from the Odyssey, but I don't recognize it. Yeah, I don't recognize it. But it shows you the kind of difference between the red figure and the black figure pottery, right? Yeah, so we have a few precious metals showing up in Greece, not very much. And then I just want to give you a little bit of history before we dive into the good stuff, okay? So before we get into kind of regular Greek culture, ancient Greece as we know it, there is some stuff that comes before, okay? So there's some earlier cultures in the Greek area that are, they're probably Greeks, like genetically speaking, they're Greeks, but their culture is still not what we would think of as ancient Greece, okay? So in the Bronze Age, we have a few different cultures showing up. There's a Minoan culture on the island of Crete. I'll show you in a map in a second. There's a Mycenean culture on the mainland of Greece. And they one is a little bit older than the other, but they coexist for some time. They both have a writing system. But unfortunately, we're still working out how to read those writing systems. So as you know from the Indus River Valley civilization, we kind of don't know as much as we often do, right, if we can't read the writing. But I'll show you some of the things that we do know. So there's a Bronze Age, okay, of these kind of older cultures, Minoan and Mycenaean. Then there's a bit of a Dark Age, okay, so where everyone kind of leaves the cities, people stop writing things down. We don't really know what's going on, right? It's dark for historians, right? Because we have no idea what's happening. And then at the end of that period, people start to live in cities again, and what we think of as ancient Greek culture starts to appear, okay? Yeah. So, and then there's an archaic period we'll get to, and then there's a classical period and a Hellenistic period. Here it is. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump through those that fast, but so I'll just give you a quick overview of what happens before the Dark Ages, and then we'll kind of spend our time in probably the classical Greek period, right? Because all the kind of interesting stuff that comes out of ancient Greek culture, for the most part, it really comes out of that classical period. And if you look, it's like 150 or 60 years long. That's it, right? 160 years, there's this kind of golden age of Greek culture, and it influences people for hundreds of years after that, right? Even, hundreds of years after that, people are influenced. So again, I'll give you a bit of a background, and then we'll jump into the key stuff, okay? But you can see here that there's an archaic period, kind of early Greek history. There's the classical, the real ancient Greece, or the ancient Greece that everybody thinks of. There's a Hellenistic period. That's when Alexander the Great conquers Greece, and Greece falls under Macedonian rule. There's a Roman period in which Greece is kind of controlled by the Romans. And then they'll be controlled by the Byzantine Empire later on, which is kind of sequel to the Roman Empire, if you will. And then there's an Ottoman Empire that controls them later on as well. So this sort of classical period is the last, it's the important kind of part of Greek history, of ancient Greece, but it's also the last time that Greece will be an independent entity until it becomes a country after leaving the Ottoman Empire. But anyway, here's where we'll start. So, as you can see, we're around 4,000 years ago or so. There's this Mycenean culture on the mainland, and there's a Minoan culture on the island of Crete, on that green island. So, this is Crete itself, the island of Crete. You can see that we've got lots of archaeological sites scattered around the island. Some of them are palaces, some of them are houses, some of them are tombs, some are shrines. Lots of evidence of people living here 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. This is kind of the main palace. It's at a place called Knossos. It's been kind of rebuilt because it was ruined or destroyed. And it's got some interesting things about it here in Knossos. You can see those big red columns are very kind of distinctive of this kind of period of Greek architecture. Here's, you can see all the tourists checking it out on a nice sunny day. Quite beautiful, big city. An artist suggests that it might have looked like this when it was, thousands of years ago when it was fully built. This is the script or the writing system that they were using. So this is Linear A. We don't really know how to read this, and so we're not really sure what it says. Which is unfortunate because, again, I think we know how much more we know about an ancient civilization when we can actually read what they've written. Right? And here, it looks quite interesting. Who knows what it says? Not me. But it looks very different from the ancient Greek lettering that will come later. So people will be writing in this language for hundreds of years, and then it'll kind of get lost. People will forget how to write it. And then when we get to archaic Greece, people will develop a brand new alphabet to write with, and it won't look anything like this. So this is kind of a very early version of Greek culture and Greek writing, but it doesn't look anything like ancient Greek does. The other thing that the Minoan culture on Crete is famous for is these kind of frescoes. And so frescoes are kind of art that you paint on plaster, as we mentioned earlier. So you take a stone wall, you cover it with nice smooth plaster, and then when it dries, you can paint scenes on it. Right? And so here's a couple of young boys. They're boxing, it looks like. Right? So they've got kind of loincloths on, and they've got kind of interesting hair. I don't know if those are like helmets or if they've kind of like shaved their head into kind of curls, or I'm not really sure what we're looking at there. Maybe some interesting, either an interesting hairstyle or some sort of head covering or hat or helmet. Not really sure. But we've got pictures of two kids boxing here. This looks like it might be a parade or a procession, maybe a marriage, who knows, right? And we've got some interesting things here. What do you notice about the skin tones? Yeah, the women are quite a bit lighter than the men. Did we see that before? Yeah, we saw that in ancient Egypt, right? Men were often painted a slightly darker color than women, right? Because men were the ones who were outside working in the sun, getting a pretty heavy-duty tan, right? And women were generally inside, protecting their skin from the sun, and so they're lighter in color. And here, we kind of see the same thing, right? Women are portrayed quite a bit lighter than men. I wonder if that means that women were, really stayed in the home and men really went out and did all of the outside work. Maybe. Maybe it's just artistic choice, but it's interesting. We also see some interesting fashion choices here, particularly for this woman, right? There are parts of her that, in our societies we generally cover, but here they seem to be out there, right? What's that? Well, I mean, yeah, would you like it? You're in favor? Oh, you're in favor? Well, it's much more airflow, right? I don't know. Still different fashion, right? Lots of nature scenes come out of this culture as well. Here we've got some playful monkeys, right, jumping around. Lots of sea life, right? We've got dolphins and fish. And again, these would have been like scenes that people had in their house, right? So instead of painting your wall a color, or instead of putting up wallpaper, if you had the money, you'd have somebody paint the walls like this, right? So this would be, inside someone's house, right? They would have this sort of scene on the wall. Kind of nice. There's also something going on with bulls on this island of Crete in the Minoan culture. We're not really sure what the sort of fascination with them was, but they were an important animal for the Minoans. Here we kind of see what looks like a game or a competition, and an incredibly dangerous one. I think what you're supposed to do is, it's almost like bullfighting, with the guy with the cape, except I think what you do is you get the bull to charge at you, and then you run at the bull, and then you kind of vault over it. So you've seen gymnasts do that, right? They run at the horse, and then they put their hands and they flip up in the air and land on the other side. I think you do that, but you do it with a bull running at you, I think. So if that sounds insane to you, then it sounds insane to me as well. But I think that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at some sort of acrobatic thing with bulls. Seems dangerous. I don't know, but that's not the only place we see bulls from the Minoan culture. We also see them in sculpture. This is a pretty fantastic bull sculpture from the Minoan period. And of course the classic myth of the Minotaur. So this is another mythological scene. That's Theseus there, and Theseus is killing the Minotaur, this half bull, half human monster who is supposed to reside on the island of Crete. And so, yeah, there's something going on with bulls, some sort of religious, supernatural type, kind of feeling about them. Again, we don't really know what the deal is with bulls, but they seem to have been an important animal for the Minoans. Now, on the mainland, we have the Myceneans, okay? And so the Myceneans are a little bit different. They built a lot of cities on hilltops, okay? So I think this is the city of Mycenae. It's on the top of a hill, you can kind of see that, and it's got defensive walls all the way around it, right? Which is really interesting, because why do you build cities on top of hills?
Because of on top of the weather is the wind.
The what?
The weather.
The weather, okay.
Yeah, it means that because if you go like down the mountain, we don't have any like wind or something like that. And at first the like biggest I think, because of safer than them.
Yeah, why is it
Because
safer?
when like another groups want to attack them, they can see them, and like they have time to protect them, like to get.
Yeah.
And the sea will rise.
They're surrounded by sea.
If you like states will.
Well, they're surrounded by sea, but they also have, they might be attacked by other cities, right?
Like every single day.
But that's-
Why they live up is like the sea level always rise from time to day.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? If you go to all the trouble, like building a city on top of a hill is more work, right? So if you're going to if people are going to build a city on top of the hill, and if they're going to build a huge wall around it, they're pretty concerned about being invaded, aren't they? They are, right? Nobody does this just for fun. They have a real concern that they're going to be invaded. So it is interesting to think about how, these city-states were probably worried about being attacked by the other city-state, and so they created defensive walls. You don't really see that on Crete. You don't see it in the Minoan culture. You don't see it in the Minoan culture, but you do see it in the Mycenaean culture. This has led some people to sort of create a bit of a dichotomy here. The idea that the Minoans were really peace-loving, right? They had all of those frescoes with happy animals and celebrations. And here we have these walled cities on top of hills. So some people said, oh, the Minoans are so peaceful and the Mycenaeans are so warlike. I don't know if it's like that really, but some people have suggested that that's the way it is. Guys all good? Do you want to add or ask?
Just have a sense of civilization. So they go into like a kingdom.
Yeah.
The capital is usually in the middle, and then expand out.
Yeah. And then if you're under attack, everybody gets in the walls of the city and close the door. What's that?
It's just like being protected.
It is being protected or it's not?
It's protected.
Yeah.
You stay in the center.
Yeah. And then, you can also use gravity, right? Then you can start throwing things at people who are trying to climb the hill to get to your city. You can start
But
dumping
if you
stuff
go
over the
out
wall.
for work, or you get finding food, you need to go down, right? And when you go back, you need to carry all the food you get and walk uphill.
Yeah.
That's tired.
I know, you're tired. It's a pain in the butt, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. The fact that they did it anyway means that they were pretty concerned, right? Because this is a chore, right? This is a chore. So here's some shots inside the city. You can see these massive stone blocks. This really big one with these two lions. Do I have a closer picture? Yeah, I do. These two lions. The later Greeks thought that these cities were constructed by giants because the stones were so big. They were like, this is the age of giants. It must have been giants that built these cities. They're so big. Probably not, but still, very impressive construction. Here's kind of an artist's view of Mycenae. So what it might have looked like when it was, at the time when it wasn't ruined. The other thing that's interesting that comes out of the Mycenaean period is, well, first Linear B, which I don't believe we can read either, so we don't know what this says. Also different from later ancient Greek, but also stuff like this. And so this was found by a guy named Heinrich Schliemann. And Heinrich was kind of an amateur archaeologist. He read the Iliad and the Odyssey, those two epic Greek stories, and he thought that he could find the cities that were in the story. There was a city of Troy, there was a city of Mycenae, there was a king of Mycenae called Agamemnon, and Schliemann thought, I'm going to use the clues in the book, and I'm going to find these cities. Okay? Everyone else thought he was a crazy person, right? That would be like saying, okay, I'm going to take the Harry Potter books, and I'm going to use the clues in the Harry Potter books to find Hogwarts.
Go to the platform in London.
What's that?
Go to London.
Yeah,
Get a platform.
the platform, 9 3/4.
Yeah, and go to London.
Why did they think that he's stupid?
Well, because they thought it was a myth.
But they trusted it.
They said, yeah, but this is in the 1800s, right? So Heinrich Schliemann was like, I'm going to read these books and find the real city. And other people were like, it's just a myth, guy. It's like looking for Hogwarts. It's ridiculous, right? You're never going to find it. But Heinrich Schliemann proved them wrong because he did find Troy, and then he went and found Mycenae. So there is some kind of truth to the stories, or the stories are based on real places. So So Schliemann found this burial. He found this golden mask on the face of one of these dead guys, and he said, "I've found it. I'm looking at the face of Agamemnon." Agamemnon is the king from the Iliad, big main character. It's not Agamemnon, highly doubtful. He had no proof to be able to say that. But it's still an important find from Mycenae, and it's connected to that period, right? So from the Iliad and the Odyssey, there are these cities that are mentioned, and these cities are real places, right? So this city here, Mycenae, that's mentioned in the Iliad. Agamemnon is the king of Mycenae, and he goes off to lay siege to the city of Troy, right? That's what happens in the story. And as it turns out, some of these places are real, right? The events of the Iliad, I'm not sure that we know if they actually happened, but the cities were real places anyway. Yeah, and so this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll give you a break here. So after this period, we get into a dark age. Okay, so again, people kind of leave the cities. They go off and kind of live in the hills. They're living a kind of a decentralized lifestyle. Nobody's really writing anything down, and so we don't really know what's going on. Right? Remember, a similar thing happened in India. Indus River, yeah. They had a big civilization, and then people just kind of left, right? They went off into the hills and farmed on their own, right? So the same thing happens here. We have a dark age. People don't write anything down. We're not really sure what's going on until we get to archaic Greece, when people start to come back together. They start to write things down again, and then we can kind of see what's happening.
Because they have a period list, and so no one is recording anything in that period.
Yeah.
Or so a group of people living here, and they move on. Another group of people came after that period. Then the other group just report what they observed.
Are you referring to the Myceneans and the Minoans? Oh, yeah. Well, I think the thing about the writing things is that keep in mind that not everyone is literate, right? So here in modern society, basically everyone is. In ancient society, really only a few people are, and so it's very easy to kind of forget that skill because almost no one has it, right? And so, those guys stop writing things down. They don't pass on their skill after a generation or two. People just kind of forget how writing was done, and they have to, they got to figure it out again later. And that's exactly what they do here. And again, it's because they don't really have a reason to write after things become decentralized, and just not that many people know how to do it. It's a very specific skill that not many people have. Okay, let's take a break. And then when we come back, a little more Greece, and then we'll talk a little bit about the presentation as well. Right. Okay. Break time. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. As I mentioned here, I just wanted to lay out what happened. So we've got those two cultures in the Bronze Age, the Minoans and the Myceneans. We transition into the Dark Ages where those people kind of scatter and leave their major urban centers and go off to the countryside. We don't know a lot about what's going on. Some people suggest that there are these. Some people suggest that climate change might be an issue. Some people have suggested that there are these mysterious sea peoples that are floating around the Mediterranean, and they seem to be like showing up in like by water, showing up in ships and running ashore and attacking cities and trying to like steal their stuff. So people tend to run away a little bit. There's a few factors, but either way, people kind of disappear into the countryside. We don't know a lot about what's happening until we get to around 700 or 800 years BC, so about 2,800 years ago. And that's kind of when we enter the archaic period of Greece. And so this is kind of the foundation of ancient Greek culture. We start to have a writing system show up. So ancient Greek is developed as a writing system. People start to write things down. Our first copies of the Iliad and the Odyssey come from this period. And so, again, big works of literature that are important, just like the Epic of Gilgamesh is for Mesopotamia, or the Mahabharata for India. Here we have these epic stories from Greece, the Iliad and the Odyssey. This is also a period in which we have something developing known as Hellas or Hellenism, okay? And so Hellas or Hellenism is kind of the feeling of a Greek culture, right? So we said the Greeks are kind of scattered all around the Mediterranean, right? There's all kinds of different city-states. They're spread out quite a bit. They're isolated from each other by mountains and all kinds of things. But they do kind of share a culture, and they do share a feeling that they are united in some way, okay? So even though I said, Athens is different from Sparta, is different from Corinth, all of these city-states are unique places to live, everybody still feels like they're part of a bigger thing, right? They're part of a bigger Greek culture, right? They are a people, they do belong together. And so we see some of those things showing up here, like the first Olympic Games in 776 BC. And so again, these are the same Olympic Games that we still hold every 4 years. They start here in 776 BC as part of a festival to honor the god Zeus. And so Zeus is thought to live on Mount Olympus. And so at the base of Mount Olympus, they have the Olympic Games. And so people could come from all over the Greek world and compete in various events for glory and recognition, right, of being a winner at the Olympic Games. Like I mentioned, the Odyssey and the Iliad are written down for the first time in this period. And again, they're important because they're stories that all Greeks are telling to each other, right? And so they contain some important values and beliefs and ways of looking at the world, common stories that everybody knows. All of those things are kind of wrapped up in the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I think we may have some time to talk about those a little bit later, or maybe not. We'll kind of see how it goes. Right, so we have that. We have the polis, right, the basic unit of government, the city-state in ancient Greece. And each one is different. Okay, this is the last thing I'll say to you, then I'll show you something for the presentation assignment. We can probably think of Greek city-states as being sort of politically organized in 3 ways. Okay, so if we went back again to Mesopotamia, to their city-states, basically they all had a king, right? There was a king in every city-state, and he was the king of that city. But here in Greece, we had kind of basically 3 kinds of systems. So some Greek city-states were monarchies, mono being one, archon being ruler. Archon is the Greek word for ruler. Mono archon, one ruler. In some places you have oligarchy. Actually, I don't really know where that comes from. Oligarchies are where you have a small group of people ruling a society. And then the third, you have democracy, right? And democracy comes from the word demos, the people, right? So we kind of have three different types of political organization here. Monarchies, I think we're familiar, right? You have one king or a ruler or a pharaoh or a shah or a harsh authoritarian dictator. Whatever you have basically one ruler who has all the power and tells everybody else what to do, right? In oligarchies, you have a group of people who are ruling, right? Sometimes they're chosen from different groups. Sometimes they're hereditary positions. Sometimes they are the people, the noble people, right? The people from certain families. Sometimes they're the most distinguished in terms of war. Sometimes they're the wealthiest people. Either way, there's kind of a small group of people running the city-state. And then finally, and maybe more, what we'll spend some time talking about is democracy. And so democracy, of course, is a political system where the people hold the power, and they either vote to make decisions or they elect people to vote on their behalf, right? And of course, modern democracies are like that. We don't have time to vote on every issue, so we elect people who will go to Ottawa or who will go to Victoria and vote for us, right? Vote in our place. As we'll see, as I think we'll see, the appearance of democracy in this period is very interesting and very weird, because in basically no other civilization was power ever given to the people, right? It was always held by a ruler, an emperor, a king, a pharaoh. It was always held by the most powerful. And the circumstances that lead to giving power to the people are kind of strange, and it's interesting that it happened in the first place, and it's interesting kind of how it happens. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Very interesting story, though. Okie dokie. So what I wanted to share with you here regarding the presentation was this. Well, not that. This. So this will be kind of a marking guide for how I will grade your presentation, okay? Now, there's a copy of this on Microsoft Teams. So if you go to the assignment that says Part 2 Presentation, I've attached this marking guide to that assignment so you can look at it on your own and sort of make sure you're doing what you need to be doing. I'm kind of looking at, as you can see, I'm looking for kind of 4 categories of thing, okay? The first one I'm looking for is your research and your sources, okay? So I'll be looking to see, do you have enough information in this presentation to explain what you need to explain, right? And to show what you need to show. Obviously, don't bury us in, an avalanche of information. It's not helpful either. But do you have enough there to explain what you're talking about, to give us enough context, to answer the questions that you need to answer? Is the information that should be there, is it there? Have you found it, right? And at the end, have you cited your sources? Have you listed them all? Have you done it in MLA format? I'm looking for those things in that section, okay? So is there enough research done? Is the information that should be there there? Are your sources properly listed, okay? Second thing I'm looking for is kind of your argument and your critical thinking. So each of the topics that you were supplied with had a bunch of questions, a bunch of guiding questions asked. And I would like you to answer those questions, right? Your presentation should be the answer to those questions or to that big question. If you can manage to answer the question using the kind of argumentative stuff that we've talked about? Do you have a main point and then points that support it, right? Do you have an argument? That's really going to help you out, right? It's really going to make your presentation make sense and be organized, right? So are you answering the questions, and are you kind of providing evidence from your research that answers those questions? Okay. Third, course connections. Now, what I'm asking for here is not necessarily that you add in stuff from the course, right? So don't take information that we've already had and just throw it in there, right? What I want to see is, have you been here? Okay? Do you understand some of the major ideas that we've talked about, some of the comparisons that we've made, some of the things that we've discovered? Do I see evidence in your presentation that you've been here and that you've learned something, right? And I've seen in the past, I have seen students give presentations, and not good presentations, but they've given presentations where I've looked at it and I was like, yeah, but anyone could have given that, right? Anyone could have just walked off the street and did what you did, right? And there's really, I can't see any evidence that you've actually been in class and absorbed anything from what we've done, right? So I'm not really looking for, don't just pull something out that we've done and stick it in there, but show me that you've been here. Show me that you've heard some of the things that we've talked about, right? I'm looking for evidence that you learned something in here, right? And that can be a little bit subtle, right? It doesn't have to be strong, but I just want to see some evidence that you kind of learned something in here and you got something from the course, okay? And the third one is presentation. So does your PowerPoint or Keynote, whatever it is, does it look nice? Is it nicely formatted? Did you come up here and do your best to present to us? Did it look like you thought about it a little bit before you came up? Again, you don't have to be a perfect public speaker. Public speaking is difficult and intimidating, right? It's hard to do. I know that. I'm not looking for perfection, but did you take some care to do your presentation as best you can? Okay? And so, yeah, I'm looking for you to do some research, answer the questions, try to make an argument, integrate some of the sort of broad ideas we've talked about in this course, and do a nice, neat job of it. That's what I'm looking for. Easy peasy lemon squeezy? Okay. So that's what I'll be kind of referring to when I grade you. Again, it's in Microsoft Teams and it's in the assignment. If you look for a Part 2 presentation, this will be attached to the assignment itself. And yeah, you can see. And so I'll provide you with some comments and I'll give you a grade based on where I think you fall in those categories, right? Have you just barely done what you needed to do? That's minimally met expectations. Have you done what you've needed to do and kind of checked all the boxes? Have you exceeded expectations? Have you gone a little bit above and beyond what you had to do? Or on the other end, did you kind of not really do what I asked and you did something weird and now it's not quite what it's supposed to be? Okay? That's what I'll use to grade you. Are there any questions right now that I can answer for you? If you go over time? Yes, I won't cut you off, but keep in mind you're supposed to be around 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more. I won't cut you off, but try to be roughly in the ballpark. Okay, don't go less than 10 minutes if you can avoid it. That would probably not quite be enough, but don't. I did have one student one year. I gave this assignment. I said, "Yep, 10 minutes. That'll do it." And he and his partner, they wound up being up here for 40 or 45 minutes. And so, what's that?
What did they talk about?
I don't even remember.
45 minutes.
It was massive.
It's just like he took the entire class.
Yes. But that's the thing, right? Is that y before you start doing something, 10 minutes seems like a long time. But then when you start doing it and then when you get up here, 10 minutes is really short.
So you mean that if you're doing more than 10 minutes, it's good?
Well, try to aim for 10 or a little bit more. If you go a little bit over, it's fine, right? It's not.
Because I think it might, for us, it's take about like something 20 minutes. We're going to less than.
Okay. Try to keep it a little bit leaner than that. Again, I won't stop you. But also keep in mind, there's a point where bigger isn't necessarily better, right? So you could do everything you need to do in 10 or 12 minutes or maybe 13 or 14. But I mean, if you go, 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes, you're not really doing any more. You're not doing better, you're just doing more, right? So try to think about what you're doing. Try to have it be really kind of neat and concise and organized. If you go a little bit over, I'm not going to stop you at 10 minutes and say that's it. But, a 20-minute presentation is not necessarily twice as good as a 10-minute one, right?
It's like quality.
Yeah.
Okay, quantity.
Yeah, more is not necessarily better. That's why pop songs are all 3 minutes or less. More.
No, it's
It's-
not 3 minutes long.
It's
because
true.
the one
Some
who-
songs are awesome, but
the
if they
one
went on
who
for 10
perform-
minutes, it would be like, okay, we've had enough, right?
They have an hour of repeating the 3 minutes. They have like an hour version for repeating 3 minutes. Let's go to like K-pop song.
Yeah.
1 hour repeating.
Yeah.
You can see that.
I find a little K-pop goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They focus like it's not their song. It's the people who perform.
a little bit. I'm thinking of that, like, is that BTS Dynamite? Great song, but it's just long enough. If it went any longer, it'd be like, okay, I'm done. It's too much. So again, think of that. More is not necessarily, you need a certain amount, right, to make it to do what you need to do, but 10 or 20 or 30 extra minutes is not necessarily good, right? So, and if it went that long, I might actually say, okay, wrap it up, right? We got to move on. So, pardon me. Other questions that maybe I can answer for you? Yes. What's that? Yeah, after class maybe. Yeah, yeah. About the source thing? Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir. Yes, today I will post the rest of the lecture slides for the quiz next Friday. Not this Friday, next Friday. I accidentally said this Friday this morning in social justice, and everyone freaked out.
Usually like 4 to 5 minutes, so maybe 7 to 8.
You said to
It'd it'd be a little bit bigger. So maybe seven,
If I be.
maybe 7 questions if I feel I have 7 good ones. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that would be that'd be very disingenuous of me. Yeah, there's 7 questions. 7A, part A, part B, part C. Number 2, part A, B, C, and D. That'd be the worst, right? You'd all leave me horrible teacher evaluations. This guy is the worst. I wouldn't do that to you.
Last week, I did the quiz on last week.
Let's say again.
When are we going to?
So we're going to present in the last week of class. Okay, so that's not next week, but it's the week after. I'm going to give you some more class time next week to work on this, maybe even a little bit tomorrow. And how it'll work is that you'll need to be ready. I don't know if we'll start on Monday or Tuesday. I'll try and figure it out. Maybe the Monday. You'll have to be ready to go because I'm just going to spin a wheel, and if your name comes up, you go up and present. Okay? If you're not ready, 0. Okay? So you've got to be ready when your name comes up to go. Okay? Might sound harsh, but when I've done it other ways, people tend to skip, or their name comes up and they're like, oh, I'm not ready, maybe. And then I have to go through like 5 people to get someone to present, and it just takes forever. So you got to be ready. I'm going to spin the wheel. Your name will come up randomly, and then you're up. Sounds harsh, but that's the only way to get through them.
It started from when?
Like what day?
Yeah, what day did you start it?
I'm going to do the math. We'll probably start on Monday or Tuesday at the latest.
Oh, you mean that like 22nd?
No, 29.
Oh.
29 or 30th. Yeah. Last week of class is when we'll do it. And so probably start on Monday, because I'd rather have an extra day at the end than like run out of time, right? So probably start on the Monday, just to be safe. Just in case some people go on too long. You won't run out of time. Yeah.
Okay, so for example, I just react to all those or only
You did what?
I show my PowerPoint here.
Yep.
So I do like all work to see for like if
Okay. Like who can see you?
I mean everyone should be here.
Okay.
And then
Okay. Did you figure out your own answer? Or do I just not understand what you're saying? Yes. Everyone will see it. So I'll set it up so that online people can see as well, but I'm not going to broadcast it to the internet. So we'll do like a Zoom or a Teams meeting. So other students who are not here will be able to see your PowerPoint, but I won't stream it to the entire world, because that's not what you signed up for. That's what I signed up for. So yeah. So other students will be able to see it in the class if they're not physically here, but the entire world will not see it.
Okay.
Okay?
Your class is done.
Okay, so Felicia's done. Felicia's calling it. But she's right, we are out of time. So that is it. Have a good afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe a little more ancient Greece, and then maybe I'll give you some time to work tomorrow too. More time to work is better early than late, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. See you tomorrow.